Ancient Egyptians sent their dead into the afterlife with fully stocked boats and loyal servants. These 26 transformative burial customs are not just rituals, but profound philosophies carved into the earth itself. By the end of this journey, you will see human history and the nature of belief in an entirely new light. Why would some cultures leave their dead exposed to the elements on high mountain peaks? What drove an emperor to build an entire terracotta army just to be buried with him? Each answer reveals a core truth about how our ancestors faced the great unknown. What do you believe our own burial practices say about us today? That layer of dust an archaeologist brushes from an ancient skeleton holds more than just age, it holds intention. Every object placed in a grave, the specific way a body was laid to rest, even the construction of the tomb itself, was a deliberate act. This is the core of mortuary archaeology, a field that reads these final arrangements like a profound and open book. It operates on a simple but powerful principle that the way a culture treats its dead speaks volumes about how it viewed life itself. A solitary body buried with nothing but a simple shroud tells one story. A chieftain interred with a bronze sword, gold jewelry, and sacrificed animals tells another, a narrative of power, wealth, and a belief that such status continued beyond death. These are not random acts of disposal, they are carefully curated messages meant for the gods, for the ancestors, or for the community left behind. By meticulously mapping these choices, archaeologists can reconstruct ancient social hierarchies, understanding who held power and who served. They can trace spiritual beliefs, seeing which cultures prepared their dead for a long journey and which believed in a simple, quiet rest. They can even uncover details about trade and economy through the origin of precious grave goods. This foundational understanding transforms a simple list of customs into a series of deeply human stories. It allows us to see that a terracotta soldier is not just a statue, but a statement on imperial power, and a body exposed on a mountain peak is not abandonment, but a sacred return. With this lens in place, we can begin our journey through these 26 customs, each one a unique chapter in humanity's eternal conversation with the great unknown. The air in a sun-baked workshop along the Nile would have been thick with the scent of spices and sacred incense. Here, priests performed a ritual so meticulous it could last for weeks, a profound transformation of a human body into an eternal vessel. This was the heart of Egyptian mummification, a custom that stands as one of humanity's most elaborate answers to the mystery of death. It was not born from a fear of decay, but from a powerful, unwavering belief in an afterlife that was a perfect mirror of the physical world. The process itself was a sacred science. Internal organs were carefully removed and preserved in special containers known as canopic jars, each jar guarded by a specific deity. The body was then packed in natron salt, a natural substance that drew out all moisture, leaving the skin and bones desiccated and permanent. Finally, the wrapping began, a ritual in itself. Dozens of yards of linen strips were used, and within these layers, priests placed intricate amulets, each one a magical charm for protection and power in the world to come. Think about the intention behind every step. This was not merely about preventing rot. It was about ensuring the spirit, the part of a person known as the Ka, had a permanent and recognizable home to return to. Without this physical anchor, the spirit would be lost and the soul's journey would fail. The entire elaborate procedure was a map for the deceased, guiding them through the treacherous underworld, helping them pass the final judgment, and ultimately allowing them to be reborn each day alongside the sun god, Ra. So when we look at a mummy today, we are not just looking at an ancient body. we are looking at a perfect, preserved expression of hope, a belief so strong that an entire civilization dedicated immense resources to making sure life, in some form, never truly ended. While the Egyptians preserved the body for an eternal return, another culture prepared their honored dead for a one-way voyage into the unknown. Picture the stark silhouette of a Viking longship, not cutting through ocean waves but resting silently on a bed of earth, its mast pointing toward the heavens. Inside, a chieftain lies in state, surrounded by his axe, his shield, and the personal treasures that defined his life. This was a ship burial, a custom as dramatic and formidable as the warriors it commemorated. For the Vikings, death was not an end but a departure. The ship was the perfect vessel for this final journey, a symbol of their mastery over the seas, now repurposed to carry a soul across the mystical boundaries between the world of the living and the realms of the gods. The destination for the most revered warriors was Valhalla, the great hall of Odin, where they would feast and fight until the end of days. But such a journey was not to be undertaken alone or empty-handed. The inclusion of weapons was essential for the battles to come. Valued possessions like silver and fine textiles affirmed their status in the next life. In the most profound cases, sacrificed animals and even loyal servants were included, sent along to continue their duties for eternity. This reveals a worldview in sharp contrast to the quiet rest of a grave. For the Vikings, the afterlife was a direct continuation of a warrior's existence, a place where honor, strength, and social standing earned in life were not lost but eternally validated. The burning or burying of an entire ship was an immense sacrifice, a statement of profound belief that what awaited was worth the cost of an entire world left behind. Deep within a cave in what is now Iraq, the earth held a secret for 60,000 years. It was the grave of a Neanderthal, but this was no simple burial. When archaeologist Ralph Solke carefully examined the soil, he found something that would rewrite our understanding of human history, not stone tools or weapons, but ancient pollen. This individual had been laid to rest on a soft bed of carefully gathered flowers, including yarrow and cornflower. These were not random weeds. These plants were known for their vibrant colors and, significantly, their medicinal properties. For decades, Neanderthals were portrayed as primitive brutes, but this single, tender act shatters that image completely. Placing flowers with the dead is not about utility. It is an act of pure sentiment, a gesture of care that speaks to a deep emotional capacity. It suggests that those who buried their companion understood loss and felt a need to honor the deceased with beauty and meaning. This ritual implies a mind capable of thinking beyond mere survival, pondering the mystery of death itself. Could they have believed in some form of an afterlife, a world where the spirit might appreciate the color and scent of a flower? Or was it a final, compassionate gift from the living to the dead, a way to ease their journey into the unknown? This discovery in Shanidar Cave proves that the roots of ceremony, of grief, and of reverence are not a recent invention of our own species. They are a fundamental part of a shared inheritance, a profound emotional legacy that connects us across an unimaginable gulf of time. The quiet reverence of a flower-strewn grave stands in stark contrast to the ambition echoing from deep beneath a Chinese mountain. There, an entire army waits in perfect, silent formation, a legion of clay and purpose guarding the tomb of the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. This was not a hidden burial for a single soul, but the construction of an entire subterranean empire, populated by over 8,000 life-sized terracotta soldiers, each one unique. Their creation marked a profound shift in tradition. Earlier Chinese rulers were often buried with real servants, soldiers, and concubines, sacrificed to accompany them. Emperor Qin's choice to use intricate clay replicas instead was, in its own way, a monumental act of mercy, preserving his living subjects for his earthly kingdom while still ensuring his power in the next. The sheer scale of this project is almost beyond comprehension. Think of the logistics, the thousands of artisans working for decades to create not a faceless, identical horde, but an army of individuals. Every single soldier possesses distinct facial features, hairstyles, and even expressions. This incredible detail suggests a surprising value placed on the individual within the massive collective, as if the emperor needed not just a military force, but recognizable, loyal subjects for all eternity. What does this tell us about his view of the afterlife? It was not a spiritual paradise of rest, but a direct and literal continuation of his imperial rule. He believed he would need to administer, defend, and command his vast empire beyond death, and his authority was so absolute he saw it transcending the mortal realm completely. The Terracotta army is more than a collection of statues. It is a three-dimensional declaration that for some, death was not an end to power, but its ultimate confirmation. High on the windswept plateaus of Tibet, the air is thin and the ground is often too hard for digging. Here, the most common funeral rite is a sky burial, a practice that might seem startling at first glance, but one that holds a profound and beautiful logic. A body is carried to a designated, remote mountain peak, where it is ceremonially dismembered and offered to waiting vultures. This is not an act of disrespect or carelessness. It is the ultimate act of selfless generosity, rooted deeply in the principles of Vajrayana Buddhism. In this worldview, the physical body is a temporary vessel, a borrowed shell for the consciousness that resides within. Once death occurs, that consciousness has moved on and the body is an empty husk. To bury it in the earth would be wasteful, even selfish. To burn it requires precious wood, a scarce resource in that high altitude. But to offer it directly back to the cycle of life, to feed other living beings and allow them to survive, is seen as a final, powerful gift. This act, known as jeta, or giving alms to the birds, embodies the core Buddhist ideals of compassion and the transitory nature of all things. It is a visceral, daily reminder of impermanence. The body we inhabit, with all its joys and pains, is not ours to keep. By willingly returning it to nature in this direct and unflinching way, the practice teaches a radical acceptance of death as a natural, necessary part of a continuous cycle of giving and renewal. It asks a fundamental question of all of us: what greater act of kindness can we offer the world than the gift of our own physical form? From the Tibetan peaks where bodies become gifts for the sky, we journey to a custom rooted in a very different kind of sacrifice. The practice of sati in ancient India presents one of history's most complex and somber rituals, where a widow would end her own life on her husband's funeral pyre. To modern eyes, this act is undeniably tragic, yet to understand it is to peer into a world where spiritual duty and social identity were fused into a single, fiery purpose. This was not seen as a simple suicide, but as the ultimate expression of a wife's devotion, a final act of purity that would guarantee her reunion with her husband in the afterlife. The concept driving this was dharma, a profound sense of sacred duty that governed every aspect of life. For a woman, her dharma was intrinsically tied to her husband. He was her path to spiritual merit and social standing. His death did not simply leave her alone, it rendered her spiritually incomplete and socially vulnerable. By choosing sati, a woman was seen as fulfilling her dharma to its absolute conclusion, transforming a moment of profound personal loss into a public demonstration of unwavering faith and honor. Her self-sacrifice was believed to bring immense spiritual blessings upon both her and her husband's family, cleansing them of sin and ensuring their place together in the next world. This custom reveals a perspective where the afterlife was a direct mirror of earthly relationships. A woman's identity was so deeply merged with her husband's that a continued existence without him was considered inconceivable, both in this life and the one to come. The ritual forces us to confront the powerful and often devastating intersection of deep faith, rigid cultural expectations, and the roles society assigns. It shows how the promise of an afterlife can be used to frame extreme actions, turning personal grief into a public ideal and making the ultimate sacrifice appear as the ultimate honor. The sharp sting of ritual sacrifice fades into the cool, still waters of a northern bog. Here, in the dense, tea-colored peat of Denmark and Ireland, time itself seems to have stopped. The bodies that emerge from these wetlands are not skeletons, but eerily preserved people, their skin tanned to leather, their facial features, and even the last expression of agony perfectly intact after 2,000 years. These are the bog bodies, and their silent testimony speaks of a world where death was a direct transaction with the divine. The chemistry of the bog is a perfect preservative, an acidic, oxygen-poor environment that halts decay and tans the flesh. But it is the manner of their deaths that reveals the true nature of their fate. The Toland man, for instance, was found with a gentle, sleeping expression, a stark contrast to the leather noose still tight around his neck. The Grobel man's throat was cut from ear to ear. These were not casualties of battle or common crime. The evidence points to ritual execution, a calculated offering. Scholars believe these individuals, often young and in good health, were chosen as sacrifices to powerful gods of fertility, sovereignty, or the land itself. They were given to the bog during times of famine, political unrest, or at the changing of the seasons, a desperate plea to the forces that governed life and death. Why the bog? These wetlands were liminal spaces, neither fully land nor fully water, places believed to be thresholds to the other world. Placing a sacrificial offering in such a boundary was a way to send a direct message to the gods. It was a sacred act of exchange, a life given to ensure the community's survival, to guarantee the harvest would return or the chieftain's rule would remain secure. The bog bodies are a haunting reminder that for our ancestors, the boundary between life and death was not a fixed wall, but a permeable membrane, one that could be influenced, negotiated with, and even appeased through the most solemn and terrifying of gifts. The stark logic of the bog sacrifices gives way to an equally uncompromising ritual, one that unfolds under the open sky on lonely hilltops. In ancient Persia, the Zoroastrians built circular, raised platforms of stone known as the Towers of Silence. Upon these open-air structures, the dead were laid to rest, but they were not left to simply decay. The body was exposed to the sun and to scavenging birds, primarily vultures, in a process known as excarnation. This might seem like a harsh fate, but it was born from one of the most profound religious principles of the ancient world. In the Zoroastrian faith, a corpse was considered the ultimate impurity, a creation of the evil spirit, Angra Mainyu. It was seen as a source of contamination so potent that it could defile the sacred elements themselves. Burying a body would pollute the sacred earth. Consigning it to a river would poison the holy waters. Cremating it would taint the pure essence of fire. The only acceptable solution was to place the body where it could not harm God's good creation, and where the natural world could efficiently and cleanly dispose of it. The vultures were not seen as defilers, but as divine agents of purification, swiftly stripping the flesh from the bones and leaving the clean, white skeleton behind. After the elements had done their work, the dried bones were gathered and placed in a central ossuary pit within the tower, where they would gradually dissolve into dust. This entire ritual was a physical enactment of the Zoroastrian dualistic worldview, a cosmic struggle between the forces of good, led by the wise Lord Ahura Mazda, and the forces of evil. By ensuring a pure departure, the community was actively participating in this struggle, siding with order against chaos and with purity against decay. A proper excarnation was not just about hygiene, it was a final act of spiritual duty. It prepared the soul for its journey to the Chinvat Bridge, the bridge of judgment, where its fate in the afterlife would be decided solely by the weight of its own thoughts, words, and deeds in life. The body, now empty, had to be disposed of in a way that did not tip the scales toward impurity, allowing the soul to stand before its maker unburdened by the physical corruption left behind. A vast, layered mountain of oyster and clam shells rises from the Japanese coastline, a monument built from the debris of countless meals. These are the Jomon shell mounds, known as kaizuka, and to walk among them is to trace the outlines of a culture that saw no hard line between the living and the dead. For the Jomon people, these were not simple garbage dumps. They were the very fabric of their world, a place where the remnants of daily life became the sacred ground for eternity. Within these immense piles of shell, animal bone, and broken pottery, they carefully buried their deceased, often laying them to rest in a tightly flexed fetal position. This posture is a profound statement in itself. Why curl a body as if returning to the womb unless you believe in a form of rebirth, a cycle where death is merely a prelude to entering the Earth Mother once again? The ritual often included a sprinkling of red ochre over the body, a vibrant, earthy pigment that symbolized life, blood, and perhaps a hope for renewal in the world to come. But the most telling detail is the seamless integration of the cemetery with the midden. Human bones lie nestled among the shells of gathered food, the bones of hunted animals, and the shattered tools of everyday existence. This was not a case of careless disposal or a lack of reverence. It was a deliberate philosophy made physical. For the Jomon, the cycles of consumption, life, death, and decay were all part of one continuous, unbroken circle. The clam they ate for dinner and the relative they buried with care both came from the earth and both would return to it, each nourishing the other in a great, interconnected web of existence. Their burial custom reveals a holistic view of the universe, one where the community of the living and the community of the dead shared the same physical space, bound together by the very substance of their survival. These colossal stones have stood for over 5,000 years, their massive weight a silent testament to a belief system that moved mountains. Across Western Europe, from the great mound of Newgrange in Ireland to the countless dolmens of Brittany, early farming communities undertook a project of almost unimaginable scale. They were building houses for their dead, but these were no simple graves. These were passage tombs, intricate structures designed with a precision that still baffles engineers today. The entrance to Newgrange, for instance, is crowned by a unique roof box, a narrow opening perfectly aligned so that on the dawn of the winter solstice, a single, brilliant shaft of sunlight pierces the total darkness of the inner chamber, illuminating the sacred space for exactly 17 minutes. This was not a random feature, it was the entire point. The alignment with the sun reveals a world view where death was not a departure from the world, but a transition into a realm that was deeply and fundamentally connected to the cosmic order. The sun's annual rebirth at the solstice mirrored the hoped-for rebirth of the souls within. The ancestors were not gone, they had simply joined a different part of the great cycle, one tied to the sun, the moon, and the turning of the seasons. Think of the immense communal effort this required. There were no wheels, no metal tools, just countless hands hauling stones weighing tons across vast distances. This was not the work of a single powerful chieftain, but the collective labor of an entire society, driven by a shared, profound conviction. They were building a permanent gateway between their world and the next, a place where the living could commune with the dead, and where the dead, now part of the cosmic machinery, could perhaps intercede for the living, ensuring fertile harvests and the continuation of their lineage. The tomb was more than a cemetery. It was an astronomical instrument and a temple, a physical anchor tying the fate of the community to the eternal rhythms of the universe itself. Beneath the bustling streets of ancient Rome lay another city, a city of the dead. While Roman citizens typically cremated their loved ones, the early Christian and Jewish communities chose a different path, carving out vast, labyrinthine cemeteries in the soft volcanic rock. These were the catacombs, miles of tunnels where bodies were laid to rest in shelf-like niches called loculi, sealed with marble slabs or tiles. This practice of inhumation, of burying the body intact, was not a secret act of defiance but a legally sanctioned choice, one that reflected a fundamentally different vision of eternity. For these communities, the physical body was not a temporary shell to be discarded. It was a sacred vessel destined for a glorious future. Their faith was anchored in the promise of a physical resurrection, a belief that at the end of time the dead would be raised, body and soul reunited. To cremate a body was to destroy the very temple that God would one day restore to life, so they preserved it, laying it in the earth to await that final, triumphant day. But the catacombs were more than just a storage place for bones. They were a gallery of hope. The walls are adorned with simple, powerful frescoes depicting scenes from the Bible, images of Jonah being saved from the whale, of Daniel in the lion's den, of Lazarus rising from his tomb. These were not mere decorations. They were a visual creed, a declaration of faith painted in the heart of darkness. They told a story of deliverance, of rescue from peril, and of life emerging victorious from the grip of death. Walking through those silent, cool passages, a visitor would be surrounded by these affirmations. The message was clear and unwavering that even here, in the deepest shadows, the promise of divine salvation shone brightly. The catacombs transformed from a simple burial ground into a profound theological statement, an underground manifesto declaring that death does not have the final word. Thousands of years before the pharaohs perfected their art along the arid coasts of the Atacama Desert, a different kind of preservation was taking root. The Chinchorro people were creating the world's oldest known artificial mummies, a tradition that began over 7,000 years ago, but their approach reveals a philosophy entirely their own. While Egyptian mummification was often reserved for royalty and the wealthy elite, the Chinchorro practice was profoundly democratic. They preserved everyone, men and women, the elderly, and most tellingly, even the very young, children and babies. This was not a privilege of status but a fundamental right of belonging. The process itself was astonishingly complex, a testament to their reverence. A body was carefully disarticulated, its organs and flesh removed. The skeleton was then reinforced with sticks and reeds for structural support, the body rebuilt with clay and fibers, and the skin, often from sea lions, was refitted like a garment. The final touch was a face mask of black or red clay with a serene expression and a simple mouth, giving the ancestor a new, eternal visage. Why go to such extraordinary lengths for every member of the community? This was not about preparing a soul for a distant judgment or a heavenly journey. It was about keeping the dead physically present among the living. These mummies were not hidden away in sealed tombs. They were kept in the home or buried in shallow graves near the village, and likely brought out for important rituals and gatherings. The deceased were not gone. They were transformed into active ancestors, their preserved bodies a constant, tangible link between generations. They blurred the line between life and death so completely that the community became a single, continuous social fabric, woven together with the living and the eternally present dead. In the world's driest desert, the Chinchorro found a way to make sure no one was ever truly lost. The serene, eternal faces of the Chinchorro mummies find a powerful echo in the fired clay of ancient Peru. Gaze upon the striking portrait head vessels of the Moch civilization, and you are not looking at a generic symbol of death, but into the eyes of a specific individual. These ceramic effigies, often found in the tombs of elites, were crafted with an almost photographic realism. Every line on the face, every unique hairstyle, even a subtle, knowing expression was captured in the clay before it was fired. This was not mass production, it was the preservation of a singular identity for eternity. The intention behind this art was profound. This was a powerful form of ancestor veneration, a ritual where the memory of the deceased was not just recalled, but actively maintained and honored. The Moch believed that their ancestors held significant influence from beyond the grave, acting as intermediaries with the spiritual realm and guardians of the community's fortune. By creating such a tangible, visual connection, the living ensured that the wisdom, authority, and very essence of their forebears remained a constant presence in daily life. These portrait heads were likely used in ceremonies, spoken to, and offered libations, turning memory into an active partnership between generations. It reveals a worldview where death did not sever a relationship, it simply changed its terms. The lineage's continuity, its guidance, and its very survival depended on this unbroken chain of recognition, where the face of an ancestor, forever preserved in clay, continued to watch over the world of the living. A ship made of stone cannot sail the open seas, but it can traverse the cosmos itself. Scattered across the fields and coastlines of Scandinavia are these silent fleets, known as ship settings. Where a grand ship burial interred a single, powerful individual with their vessel, these stone outlines were monuments for the entire community. They were formed by placing large, upright boulders in the unmistakable shape of a Viking ship, a silhouette so powerful it needed no wood or sail to convey its meaning. Often marking graves or ceremonial grounds, these permanent symbols connected the land itself to the rhythms of the sea and sky. In Norse mythology, the sun was pulled across the heavens each day in a divine ship. The moon, too, had its own celestial vessel. Life, death, and the turning of the seasons were all seen as part of this great cyclical voyage. By carving the image of the ship into the very earth, these communities were doing more than just honoring the dead. They were mapping the universe, they were anchoring their belief system into the soil, declaring that every soul was on a journey as vast and natural as the path of the sun. A grave within a stone ship was not an end point, but a launching point. It was a declaration that the deceased was now embarking on the ultimate passage, moving from the realm of the living to become part of the eternal cycle, carried by the same cosmic currents that guided the stars. This custom transforms death from a moment of finality into a point of transition, a journey across a sacred sea woven into the fabric of their world. Far from the stone ships and coastal mounds, the deep Siberian forests hold a burial custom that seems to float between earth and sky. Here, the deceased were carefully wrapped in sheets of pale birch bark and then carried up into the high branches of a chosen sacred tree. This was not abandonment, but a deliberate act of elevation. The tree was understood as a living ladder, its trunk rooted in our world and its highest branches reaching into the upper world of the gods and revered ancestors. By placing the body in the canopy, the community believed they were giving the soul a vital head start on its final ascent, easing its journey home. This practice is a perfect expression of animism, a worldview that sees spirit in every part of the natural world. The forest was not a collection of resources to be managed, but a community of conscious beings in its own right. A rustling leaf, a creaking branch, the deep silence of a snow-covered grove, all of it was alive with presence and meaning. Choosing a specific tree for a burial was an act of deep respect, a request for assistance from a powerful spiritual entity. Over time, the birch bark wrapping would protect the body from scavengers while the tree itself continued its slow, patient growth. The grave was not a static monument of stone, but a living, breathing, and changing part of the forest. It grew with the seasons, its leaves falling and returning in a cycle that mirrored the journey of the soul it cradled. This custom illustrates a harmony with the environment so profound that death itself becomes a form of integration, a final act that strengthens the bond between the community, their ancestors, and the vibrant, spirited world they all shared. Unraveling a Paraka's mummy bundle is an archaeological event of immense weight and complexity. These are not simple cloth-wrapped bodies, but colossal, multi-layered sculptures of fabric and faith, some standing as tall as a person and weighing several hundred pounds. Each bundle is a nested universe, a series of cocoons that must be carefully dissected to reveal the individual seated peacefully at its heart, knees drawn to the chest in a timeless fetal curl. This posture is a powerful, silent language. It speaks of a return to the womb of the Earth Mother, a final, physical expression of the belief that death is not an end, but a folding back into the source of all life, a preparation for a new beginning. Yet the true marvel of these bundles lies in the layers themselves, a staggering investment of human artistry. A single bundle could contain dozens of individual textiles, from simple plain-weave cloth to some of the most intricate and vibrantly colored embroideries ever created. These were not mere shrouds, they were a library of cultural identity woven in thread. The images stitched into the fabric depicted mythical beings, powerful deities, and ritual scenes, a complete cosmology enveloping the deceased. Alongside these masterpieces, artisans placed dazzling gold nose ornaments and forehead decorations, along with practical items like baskets of food and finely crafted pottery. This vast accumulation of material wealth points to a belief system where the afterlife was not a spiritual abstraction, but a direct and tangible continuation of the world left behind. Status, authority, and identity earned in life were not surrendered at death. They were meticulously packed for the journey. The Paraka's elite were embarking on an existence where they would still need their finery to command respect, their ritual objects to maintain their connection to the gods, and their provisions to sustain them. The mummy bundle, therefore, is more than a tomb. It is a carefully curated survival kit for eternity, a profound declaration that the social and material hierarchies of this world were built to last forever. This act of consuming the dead stands as perhaps the ultimate expression of love and continuity. In the highlands of Papua New Guinea, the Fore people practiced a ritual known as endocannibalism, where families would consume the flesh of their deceased relatives. To our modern sensibilities, this is jarring, even unthinkable, but to label it as such is to miss its profound spiritual purpose entirely. This was not about hunger, and it was never a hostile act. It was a sacred rite of incorporation, a deeply sorrowful yet loving act born from a powerful belief that a person's spirit, their wisdom, and their unique vitality did not vanish at death. By consuming the body, the living believed they were taking that essence directly into themselves, allowing the deceased to literally live on within their kin, their strength becoming their family's strength. The boundary between the living and the dead was not a wall to be mourned, but a membrane to be transcended through the most intimate of acts. In this worldview, an individual's identity was not a solitary possession that ended with a final breath. It was a communal treasure, a shared resource that could be, and should be, preserved and redistributed among those who cherished them most. Death, then, was not an annihilation, but a transformation, a recycling of a loved one's essence back into the very fabric of the community. This custom forces us to confront our own deepest assumptions about the body and the soul. Is a person truly gone when their memory and spirit are so actively carried forward, not just in the mind but in the flesh and bone of those who remain? The Fore people answered that question with a heartbreaking, visceral certainty, dissolving the line between the living and the dead in the most profound act of remembrance imaginable. A magnificent gold torque, twisted and bent out of shape, lies half-sunken in the dark peat. Alongside it, a bronze cauldron has been ritually stabbed, its perfect form now rendered useless. These are not lost treasures but deliberate messages. While the bog bodies were human sacrifices, the peat has also preserved a wealth of artifacts offered to the Celtic gods, each one intentionally broken or damaged before it was given to the water. An exquisite sword might be heated and bent into a U shape. A beautifully decorated shield could be violently hacked apart. Why would a culture so skilled in metalwork systematically destroy its finest creations? This was the core of the votive offering, a sacred transaction with the divine. The value of the object was not just in its material, but in its function and beauty. By killing it, by removing it forever from the human world, the offering became irrevocable. It could not be retrieved or reused. This finality was the entire point, a demonstration of faith so complete that it willingly destroyed great wealth. The gifts were for powerful deities like the Morrigan, a goddess of war and fate, or Sir Nunnos, the horned god of the forest and fertility. A shattered sword was a plea for victory in battle. A bent golden torque was an offering for a chieftain's legitimacy. A cauldron, a symbol of abundance, was sacrificed to ensure a plentiful harvest for the entire tribe. This practice reveals a tangible economy of exchange between the human and the divine. The gods of the Celtic otherworld were not distant, abstract beings. They were immanent forces present in the very landscape, especially in liminal, in between places like bogs, lakes, and river sources. These watery thresholds were seen as doorways to the otherworld, the perfect place to send a gift. The irrevocable destruction of a precious object was the price of admission, a desperate and hopeful attempt to negotiate with the powers that controlled every aspect of their existence. It was a way of saying, "We give you this piece of our world, in the hope that you will give us a better one in return." A towering mortuary pole stands as a silent witness against the dense green of the Pacific Northwest rainforest. Carved from a single, massive red cedar, its surface is a complex tapestry of forms, a lineage told in wood. At its very top, a sheltered niche holds the remains of a high-status individual, elevated for all to see. This was not an attempt to hide death away, but a powerful public declaration of a life lived and a lineage that would continue. The figures cascading down the pole are not mere decoration. They are a family's heraldry, their crests. Each creature, be it a watchful raven, a powerful bear, or a mythical sea wolf, represents a chapter in the clan's history, a story of an ancestral encounter, a hard-won right, or a divine blessing. To understand the carvings is to read the biography of the deceased and the very soul of their family. This practice reveals a worldview where death was a transition that did not erase a person's social identity, but rather cemented it permanently into the community's collective memory and physical landscape. The deceased did not vanish, they were promoted. They became an ever-present ancestor, their physical remains and their storied legacy fused into a single, enduring monument. The pole served as a constant reminder to the living of their obligations, their history, and the source of their shared power. It asked a profound question of everyone who passed by. How will you live a life worthy of being carved into a tree that will stand for generations? The floor beneath your feet was more than just packed earth. It was a sacred archive. In the caves and early stone houses of the Levant, the Natufian people buried their loved ones directly under the living surface, a practice known as intramural burial. These were not hidden graves in a distant field. The deceased were laid to rest in a tightly flexed position, curled as if in sleep, and often placed in a simple pit dug into the very floor of the home. This was an act of profound intimacy, a deliberate choice to keep the physical remains of ancestors within the heart of the family's daily existence. Imagine the rhythm of life continuing above, the grinding of grain, the chatter of children, all happening just inches from a generation past. The bodies themselves were sometimes adorned with personal ornaments, necklaces of dentalium shells from the distant coast, or a dusting of vibrant red ochre across the bones. These were not casual gestures. The shells represented vast trade networks and social value, while the ochre was a powerful symbol of life, blood, and perhaps a hope for renewal. By including these items, the living were affirming the continued social identity of the deceased, treating them not as gone, but as transformed members of the household. This custom paints a picture of a world without a firm barrier between life and death. The ancestors were not distant, forgotten spirits. They were a constant, foundational presence. They were believed to offer protection and wisdom to the living, and in return, the family likely made offerings of food or spoke to them, maintaining a relationship that death could not sever. This porous boundary between realms meant that the lineage was a single, unbroken chain. The past was not behind them, it was literally supporting them, buried beneath the floor, a silent, enduring foundation for everything they built above. The concept of a permanent, individual grave was completely foreign to the residents of Çatalhöyük. In one of the world's first major settlements, death was not a single event, but a slow, deliberate ceremony of transformation. The journey began with exposure. A body would be left in an open area, perhaps on a platform, until the forces of nature and scavengers had done their work, stripping away the soft, temporary flesh. What remained were the clean, white bones, the durable architecture of a human life. This was when the true ritual began. The community would carefully gather these skeletal remains. With great reverence, they would then paint the bones with a vibrant, earthy red ochre, a pigment that screamed of life, blood, and vitality. This was not a final farewell. It was a reclamation. These painted bones were then reburied, often in a collective pit beneath the plastered floors of their homes, mingling with the remains of their relatives. This two-stage process reveals a breathtakingly sophisticated philosophy. The initial exposure was not seen as a desecration, but as a necessary release. It freed the spirit or the life force from its mortal cage. The flesh was transient, but the bones were eternal. By collecting them, painting them with the color of life, and uniting them with the bones of their ancestors, the living were performing a profound act of integration. They were literally building an ancestral collective beneath their feet, a physical foundation of lineage and memory. The individual was not lost, but their permanent essence was woven into the very fabric of the family and the home. Death for them was a process of purification and homecoming, a patient journey from being a solitary person to becoming part of an eternal, communal identity. A desert now holding only sand and stone once echoed with the sound of cattle and the voices of herders. Across the vast, arid plains of the Sahara, thousands of lithic monuments stand as stubborn proof of this lost world. These are not random piles of rock. They are cairns, tumuli, and elaborate keyhole tombs. painstakingly constructed from local stone by pastoral peoples during a time when this was a green, savanna-like landscape. The keyhole tombs are particularly telling, their distinctive shape resembling a giant keyhole viewed from above, with a circular mound connected to a long, straight corridor. Building any one of these in such an environment, even a lush one, was an immense undertaking. It required a coordinated community to gather, carry, and place countless heavy stones, a massive investment of energy and time. This was not a task undertaken lightly. In a world of nomadic herders, why build something so permanent? The answer is written in the stone itself. These tombs were territorial anchors. As the climate began its long, slow shift toward desertification and resources became scarcer, these structures served as an indelible claim. They were a message to rival groups and a promise to future generations. The monuments declared, "Our ancestors are here, their bones are part of this soil, and therefore this land, its water, and its pastures belong to us." Honoring the dead was not separate from political and economic survival. It was the very foundation of it. The tomb was a legal document carved into the earth, a permanent deed of ownership that outlasted any living memory. This custom reveals a view of death where the deceased did not depart for a distant afterlife, but instead became part of the landscape itself. They transformed from individuals into eternal sentinels, their physical remains and the massive monuments above them binding the community to a specific place forever. In a world of constant change and migration, death became the one thing that could not be moved. The quiet intimacy of a floor burial speaks of a bond that not even death could break. A different kind of home interment, however, carries the specific, heartbreaking weight of a life cut short. In the bustling port cities of the Phoenicians, a family grieving the loss of an infant or young child would perform a final, tender act. They would carefully place the tiny body inside a large, everyday storage jar, a simple ceramic vessel that had once held grain or wine, and lay it to rest beneath the compacted earth of their own home's floor. This was not a sign of neglect or a lack of resources for a proper grave. It was a profound ritual of care, a desperate attempt to keep their child safe and close. In an era of devastatingly high infant mortality, this practice was a physical expression of a parent's love and a deep-seated belief in the enduring needs of the spirit. By burying the child within the literal boundaries of the household, the family was making a powerful statement. They were ensuring their son or daughter remained a protected member of the family unit, not cast out into the anonymous and potentially dangerous unknown. The jar itself acted as a symbolic womb, a sheltered space for a soul that had barely begun its journey. This custom reveals a surprisingly inclusive spiritual view. It tells us the Phoenicians believed that even the briefest of lives merited reverence, that the spirit of a child was just as valid and worthy of a sacred place as that of a venerable elder. The grief we can still feel radiating from these simple jars is entirely universal, but the response was uniquely shaped by their worldview. They transformed their floors into a sacred landscape, a map of memory where every step was a quiet remembrance and every lost child was kept forever within the circle of home. A plastered skull from ancient Jericho holds your gaze across 9,000 years. Its eyes are empty sockets, yet they are filled with seashells, carefully set in place to see into a world beyond our own. This was not a mask, but a recreation, a new face lovingly molded over the bone of a revered ancestor using clay and paint. Across the Neolithic Near East, at sites like Ain Ghazal, communities were practicing what we now call a skull cult, an intense and intimate form of veneration. Why focus so powerfully on the skull? For these early farmers, the head was not just another bone. It was the undeniable seat of a person's identity, the house of consciousness, memory, and wisdom. By carefully retrieving the skull after death, plastering it, and painting it with lifelike features, they were doing more than remembering the dead. They were resurrecting their presence. These crafted faces were often kept within the home, or later reburied in special group caches, transforming them into tangible conduits to the ancestral realm. This was a relationship. The living could look directly into the face of their forebear, a daily, physical reminder that the lineage was unbroken. They believed that the power of the deceased, their protective influence, and their hard-won knowledge still resided within this physical relic. By curating these skulls, the family and the community were not just honoring the past, they were actively harnessing its strength for the challenges of the present. A successful harvest, the health of children, the defense of the village, all could be influenced by maintaining this direct, face-to-face connection with those who had come before. In these plastered skulls, we see the human desire to conquer the finality of death not through a journey to a distant heaven, but by bringing the ancestors back to life right here in the home, ensuring their watchful eyes never truly closed. The sheer rock face of a Lycian cliff is not a barrier but a doorway. High above the world of the living, the ancient Lycians carved the fronts of their homes directly into the stone, creating eternal dwellings that perfectly mirrored the wooden houses of their daily lives. These were not hidden crypts but proud public monuments, their elaborate facades featuring carved beams, pitched roofs, and even dummy doors, all meticulously replicated in the enduring medium of rock. This was a profound architectural statement, a declaration that the soul's final home should be as familiar and solid as the one it left behind. The choice of elevation was everything. They believed that a mythical, eagle-like creature known as a winged psychopomp would descend from the sky to carry the deceased to the afterlife. By placing their dead in these lofty areas, they were physically shortening the distance for this divine escort, bringing their loved ones closer to the heavens and the celestial journey that awaited. The tomb itself became a launch point, a sacred docking station for the soul's transition. This custom beautifully intertwines the domestic and the divine. It reveals a view of the afterlife not as a strange, foreign realm, but as a direct continuation of the familiar, a place where the soul would reside in a house just like the one it knew, forever gazing out from its high perch. The dramatic landscape was not a passive backdrop, but an active participant in the ritual, its cliffs and peaks serving as a physical ladder between the earthly and the eternal. In carving their dead into the sky, the Lycians created a permanent address for the soul, a home that would never decay, waiting for the beat of mythical wings. A life-sized terracotta couple reclines together on a dining couch, their smiles serene and eternal. This is not a sculpture of gods or heroes, but a sarcophagus lid from ancient Etruria, a final resting place designed to look like a perpetual banquet. For the Etruscans, death was not a descent into darkness but an invitation to an everlasting feast. Their tombs were not somber crypts but vibrant party halls, painted from floor to ceiling with scenes of athletic games, lively dancers, and musicians playing the double flute. The air in these chambers, though still, seems to echo with laughter and song. This joyful embrace of the afterlife stands in stark contrast to the judgment halls of Egypt or the silent watchfulness of a terracotta army. The Etruscans looked at the great unknown and saw not a trial to be endured, but a celebration to be joined. They packed their tombs with fine bronze mirrors, ornate jewelry, and elegant drinking vessels, all the necessities for a dignified and pleasurable eternity. What does this say about their culture? It reveals a people profoundly confident in the goodness of existence, a society that believed the joys of life, companionship, music, good food, and dance were not cancelled by death but perfected. Their philosophy asked a simple, beautiful question: why should the party end just because the sun has set? This celebratory custom transforms the tomb from a place of mourning into a monument of optimism, a final, unshakable declaration that for some, the journey beyond was the greatest banquet of all. These 26 customs are not a random collection of rituals, they are a chorus of human voices, each singing a different verse to the same eternal song. The Egyptian who wrapped a body in linen, the Viking who burned a ship, the Paracas weaver who embroidered a universe of cloth, and the Chinchorro mother who preserved her child, they were all staring into the same abyss and responding with the same fundamental human impulse to build a bridge. The materials and the designs changed, but the purpose was universal. They were all answering the questions that have haunted us since the dawn of consciousness. What is this fleeting spark of life within us, and where does it go when the body fails? Is it a breath that vanishes, a memory that fades, or an essence that travels on? And how do we, the living, properly honor that journey? Each burial custom is a unique philosophical argument carved, painted, or sung into existence. The Tibetan sky burial argues that the greatest honor is selfless generosity. The Etruscan tomb paintings argue that death is a celebration to be welcomed. The Neolithic passage tomb argues that the soul is bound to the cosmic cycle of the sun. They reveal a stunning truth about our species. Our ancestors were not paralyzed by the fear of death. Instead, they met that fear with a profound and creative hope, a conviction that the end of breathing was not the end of being. This hope took countless forms, a hope for renewal in the womb of the earth, for reunion with loved ones in a golden hall, for a quiet rest awaiting resurrection, or for a direct return to the cycle of nature. These rituals were the tools they used to make that hope tangible, to touch the intangible, and to give the unknown a name and a face. In every carefully placed amulet and every shattered sword, we see humanity refusing to be a passive victim of mortality. We see a creature that insists on crafting meaning, that uses ritual as a compass to navigate the greatest mystery of all. From the flower-strewn graves of our Neanderthal cousins to the terracotta legions of a Chinese emperor, these 26 transformative burial customs form a vast mosaic of human belief. Each ritual, whether born from hope, duty, or cosmic wonder, was a profound statement. They teach us a timeless truth that how a society treats its dead is a direct and unflinching reflection of how it values life itself, the strength of its community, and its place within the cosmos. The Chinchorro preserved every single person because they saw each life as an essential thread in their social fabric. The Vikings burned entire ships because they believed a warrior's honor was worth more than any earthly treasure. The Zoroastrians exposed their dead to the elements because their commitment to purity was absolute. These ancient views challenge our modern, often hurried, perspectives on mortality. They remind us of the incredible depth and diversity of spiritual thought that has flourished across our planet, each culture crafting its own unique answer to the same unanswerable question. The Roman philosopher Cicero once wrote that the life of the dead is placed in the memory of the living. Let these 26 customs live in your memory, not as a closed chapter of history, but as an open invitation to a deeper curiosity about our shared human journey. What stories will our own final arrangements tell future generations about what we truly valued? If this exploration resonated with you, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your reflections are part of this ongoing conversation, and for more journeys into the heart of historical mysteries, be sure to subscribe.